The Vietnam War was especially underrepresented on the Xbox 360 and the PS3. The previous generation did a much better job when it comes to video games set in Vietnam. The Xbox 360 and the PS3 did have some games set during the conflict, and in this episode I'm going to go through some of them. Sure, some of these games that I mentioned in this episode aren't full-blown games set during Vietnam, and that's because game developers, for some reason or the other, shied away from covering this especially fascinating and equally painful time in American history. This episode is dedicated to the veterans of the Vietnam War. One of the games that I was most excited to play for this episode was Air Conflicts Vietnam. I love the scene in Apocalypse Now when the main character joined the air cavalry to lay waste to a Viet Cong village. It was such an epic moment in movie history, and I was hoping to capture some of that magic in this game. And while it didn't exactly turn out that way, I'm glad I played it. I can't say I've ever played a Vietnam-based game that wasn't a third-person or first-person shooter, and that one is based solely on air operations in Vietnam, and now I know what it feels like. To start, this is a third-person air combat game in which you fly a variety of missions. You know, you drop the troops here, you bomb the Viet Cong village there, you support the troops down below, and that kind of thing. There's not a lot of story here. The game sort of shuffles you from one mission to the other. First, let's talk about the game's controls. They are very different depending on if you are flying a helicopter or a fighter jet. The game's helicopters move rather sluggishly, even for the attack helicopters that the game features, which is a bummer because half the fun of these type of games is movement. Everything seems to be slow on the helicopters, from the turning to the landing and the hovering, and there's the strafing. More so with the larger helicopters in the game. It doesn't completely ruin what this game is trying to do, but the developers could have made these choppers move better. Contrary to the helis, the game's jets move more realistically, and it can be fun flying over enemy positions and dropping bombs on them. Oh yeah, it's also fun engaging in dogfights with Russian MiGs in this game, and quite satisfying when you pick them off with your missiles. The balance between ground attacks and air attacks make the airplanes the clear winner in this game, which sucks because I wanted to have my Robert Duvall moment in the game. After all, Charlie don't serve. The game's combat is a literal hit or miss. There's no way to lock on the targets except during the dogfights. And I found myself shooting at things and swearing to myself that I hit it, but no dice. This can be frustrating, and I died several times because this game's difficulty is up there. Air Conflicts Vietnam features an impressive amount of real-world aircraft. It even gives you the backstory for them, telling you how they were used and their importance in the Vietnam War. The game's levels feature narratives that made me pause to think about the war. One of the missions requires you to drop Agent Orange on your enemy. After you complete your mission, you voice your disgust at doing this to your enemy. It reflects the real-world effects that the stuff had on the health of both Americans and the Vietnamese. It's one of these unpleasant aspects of the war that you don't often see in video games or even movies when you come to think of it. Nevertheless, the game surprised me within that respect. During the missions, you can swap aircraft on the fly, depending on what portion of the mission you're on. The game doesn't tell you when to do this though, and it can take some trial and error to know when to swap your planes and helicopters out. One of my gripes with this game is that if you are killed immediately after reaching a checkpoint, when you restart from the given checkpoint, the game spawns you on the moment you died. It's weird, but why did they do that? I found myself having to restart missions from the very beginning, and it was super annoying. The game's graphics, as you can see, are decent for their time, nothing to write home about, mostly greens, grays, and browns. But such were the colors you find in Vietnam, right? The game does feature some licensed music, but I didn't recognize any bangers at the time, such as the Rolling Stones' Painted Black or anything. Overall, this isn't a game that's going to win any awards, and your enjoyment of this game will receive a boost if you are into the history of the Vietnam War, and I'm guessing you are since you clicked on this video. Since it's slim pickings for the Vietnam War games on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, I recommend you spend an hour with this game and see how you like it, and let me know in the comments how you did. When it comes to cinematic Vietnam War heroes, no one is as well known as Rambo. In Rambo the video game, you get to play as a one-man army, John Rambo, through the first 3 films in the Rambo universe. Now don't get me wrong, only the first mission of the game has to do with the actual events of the Vietnam War, but it's the first time that I've ever known what it was like for Rambo during his time in the war. You are trapped in a Viet Cong prisoner camp where they just executed your fellow soldier. The Viet Cong are about to execute another one before you bust out of there and take arms against your captors.
So, What will you tell me to keep this man alive? Huh?
Rambo the video game is an on-the-rails shooter that features light RPG elements and quick-time events. You may have heard about this game in your travels and probably have been put off to it, given the many reviews that trash it. But I'm here to tell you that this game doesn't deserve the hate it gets among the video game crowd, and if you want my full review of the game, I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Anyhow, danger in the Viet Cong prisoner camp awaits you at every turn, and it's a lot of fun getting headshots, especially against Charlie. The game is quite simple in that you shoot, you reload, rinse and repeat, but that's okay, not all games need to be cerebral. After you escape from the prison camp, the war within Rambo starts to unfold as you play through the events of the first movie. It's pretty cool to listen to the police in this game sound afraid when they are hunting Rambo in the woods, with him being a Green Beret who served in Vietnam.
He's a Green Beret, the man has a Congressional Medal of Honor, he's a damn war hero!
Of course, you return to Vietnam as you play through the events of the second film, Rambo: First Blood Part 2, in which it's your mission to take photographs of a supposedly abandoned POW camp in the jungles of Vietnam. Lo and behold, the camp is not abandoned as you were told, and you make it your business to free the American POWs from the enemy. This return to Vietnam may not take place during the Vietnam War, but you get to take care of some unfinished business and it's great fun. Rambo the video game may not be fully dedicated to the Vietnam War, but it is surely dedicated to the Vietnam vet that we all know and love, and so that's pretty damn cool since not a lot of video games do this. Could this game been a lot better? Sure, but it is what it is and you have to take it as it is to enjoy it. It also helps if you're a big Rambo fan like I am. Battlefield Bad Company 2 is a beloved entry into the franchise, and in December of 2010, the game got a Vietnam DLC that featured multiplayer maps set in Vietnam. The DLC also features several Vietnam-era weapons and vehicles along with music from the era, which I love. As you can see from the footage here, it looks pretty damn awesome, but sadly there's no way to officially play this game as EA delisted it across all digital platforms and shut down its multiplayer server. But man oh man, it would have been fun to go up against other players on a Vietnam-inspired map. All of the reviews I've read about this game rave about it. I own both physical and digital copies of this game for the Xbox 360, and it just makes me sad that I never got to play this DLC. But as you can see from the footage, it looks awesome. If you've played it, what do you think of it? This is a game that I've been dying to play ever since I played the original Shellshock on the PS2, and I finally have an excuse to do so with this episode. Of course, I'm talking about Shellshock 2 Blood Trails. To begin, I wasn't expecting where they went in the story with this game. I also wasn't expecting this game to be played from a first-person viewpoint, given the original was played in a third-person viewpoint. You play as a soldier named Nate Walker who was stationed in Vietnam and is on a special mission to find out what happened to your older brother Cal. Cal was part of a special forces team that went to recover some cargo that went missing over the jungles of Cambodia. The cargo, codenamed White Knight, turned your brother into a zombie and killed most of his special ops squad. It's out there, so now it's up to you to hunt down Cal and find out what the hell went wrong and to solve the mystery of the White Knight. As you can see from the footage, this is a first-person shooter set in various locations throughout Vietnam. It starts out in a medical ward where your brother is quarantined. You have a quick word with your brother. Well, it's more like him yelling insanities. And then the place is attacked by the Viet Cong. Throughout your playthrough, not only will you be fighting against the Viet Cong, but you also have to deal with soldiers who turned into zombies from whatever the hell the White Knight cargo thing is. Now don't get me wrong, I like killing zombies just as much as anyone else does, but this game surely didn't need it. War is scary enough to begin with, and being in the jungles of Vietnam with your head on a swivel, hoping you don't get ambushed or run into some booby trap, is scary enough. Hell, some dudes in this game are so shell-shocked that they can't even fire their weapons when the enemy comes for them. The game controls much like any first-person shooter of that era. You can aim your weapon, fire, throw grenades, and pick up more weapons. You also get behind gun turrets from time to time and mow enemies down. It's good fun. One of the things that took getting used to were some of the game's motion controls. I really dislike these. but luckily you can turn them off in the settings. Every now and then you must move your controller to avoid a booby trap or a melee attack, and if you successfully pull off the motion they are asking you to do, then you survive. I didn't die too often during these parts. Heck, I didn't die too often in most of the game on the normal difficulty. These motion controls are just a bit annoying, but they aren't deal breakers. The missions in Shellshock 2 consist mostly of you traveling from location to location on the trail of your brother. There's not a whole lot of seek and destroy type missions that we found in the first game, but that's okay. This game is clearly trying to set itself apart from the first one, and I can't hate it for that. I just wish it did away with the zombies in this game. The graphics in this game are a little dark, but hey, this is Vietnam we are talking about. The music is good for that era of gaming. Both the visuals and sounds are fitting of the Vietnam theme, and that's all that matters. This game didn't boast any licensed tracks, well, none that I could hear during my playthrough, which is also different from the original Shellshock. Overall, this isn't the banger of the game that the first game was, but it does have its charms, and I highly recommend you play it so that you can get your own sense of it. If you have played this game, let me know what you think. I saved the best of the Vietnam War games for this episode in Call of Duty Black Ops. This is a game that gave me hope that people who program video games would see the value of setting games during the Vietnam War, because this game is a masterpiece. What we have here with the OG Black Ops isn't necessarily a game that's about Vietnam. It's set in Vietnam for several of the game's missions that deal with the game's protagonist, Alex Mason, as he flashes back to his time in country while he's being interrogated by the CIA. You won't be able to do any Vietnam missions in Black Ops until the 5th mission, titled SOG, which stands for Studies and Observation Group, which is a real-life covert operations unit in Vietnam. Anyhow, that mission takes place during the Battle of Quezon Son. You arrive at the base to be greeted by series favorite Frank Woods, and the console does a great job of making you feel as if you are on a military base in the backwoods of Vietnam. You go for a little ride with Woods as he shows you around, but then you are attacked by the VC and must drive them back. There's a lot of action to be had on this stage, and it feels as chaotic as it looks. During this mission, you must help defend a series of trenches from the invading North Vietnamese army, using a wide variety of machine guns and grenade launchers. There are many highlights in this stage in which you get to feel like a hero during the battle, including when you get to use the Grim Reaper against NVA tanks, and during the final part of the game where you defend Hill 861 against a large NVA swarm. It's awesome. In another one of the game's missions, you climb into a boat to locate a Soviet plane that crashed in the jungles of Vietnam, and has shipment of Nova 6, which is a chemical weapon that the Russians want to get a hold of. It basically kills people within seconds after inhaling it. Fun times. Anyhow, driving the boat while gunning down endless enemies and using rockets to destroy everything in sight is extremely fun. In the mission Payback, which is the 10th one of the game, you are treated to a familiar scene if you watch the Deer Hunter movie, and you are playing Russian roulette just as it did in the film with good old Frank Woods. You escape from the POW camp and take stunning revenge on your captors, including hijacking one of their helicopters and laying waste to their base. Flying around in a Russian helicopter, shooting down bridges and artillery is a video game experience that never gets old. Anyone who's played a Call of Duty game knows about the game's gunplay, and for those who don't, it comes down to a realistic first-person shooter mechanic that is tried and true in video game history. And playing this game reminds me of why the Call of Duty franchise basically took over the first-person military shooter genre. You are going to love everything about this game, even the missions that don't take place in Vietnam, from the sights and the sounds to the gunplay, and yes, even the story that is a little bit out there, but it has to do with the hero having some information that needs to come out so that democracy can win. Of course, this game has a lot going for it in the single player campaign, and when you add the multiplayer along with the zombies mode, you are in for a great time. This is, in my opinion, the best game on the Xbox 360 and the PS3 that is set in Vietnam. And I hope to see more companies make a game like this so we can enjoy it. If you played this game, let me know what you think of it and how it compares to the other Call of Duty games. And that's going to be it for the Big Retro Show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked this episode, then please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And don't miss my other video that I did on Vietnam games having to do with the Xbox and the PS2.